Welcome to the Zweig Podcast, putting architectural, engineering, planning, and environmental consulting advice and guidance in your ear. Zweig Group's team of experts have spent more than 3 decades elevating the industry by helping AEP and environmental consulting firms thrive. And these podcasts deliver invaluable management, industry, client, marketing, and HR advice directly to you, free of charge. The Zweig Podcasts, elevating the design industry one episode at a time.
Welcome back to the Zweig Podcast, where we explore the latest insights, strategies, and challenges shaping the AEC industry. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and today I have the honor of sitting down with a true icon in the design industry space. His name is Mark Zweig. Mark has spent an incredible 46 years in the AEC industry. He founded Zweig Group and continues to share his wisdom through the Zweig Letter. He has seen it all, literally, from industry booms to economic downturns, and has built a reputation for cutting through the noise with practical, no-nonsense advice. In today's episode, we're talking about leadership in uncertain times, why optimism is a game changer, and why now, more than ever, is the time for AEC firm leaders to break the rules and rethink how they do business. If you've ever felt like your firm is stuck, if you're looking for ways to lead with confidence, or if you just need that extra push to try something bold, this episode is for you. Let's jump into the conversation with Mark Zweig.
Well, after all that, I'm just grateful I didn't spit my water all over my computer.
Right, exactly.
Here. We wouldn't even be able to have this conversation then.
No, man, please. Are you kidding me? Like I said, we could talk about this till the cows come home. I mean, Mark, you are now a professional podcaster. You have your own show and you do a number of things. And of course, for the audience, for the uninitiated, Mark is the reason why I even had an opportunity in the design industry. And in 1997, you invited me to join what was at the time Zweig White and Associates. And I made my way to a little hamlet in Massachusetts called Natick, Massachusetts, and even convinced me to move there with a $1,000 bonus. I don't know if you remember.
That's right.
That,
I remember that. Yeah,
but you used to have the bonus to get people to move to Natick.
You were living in that old mill that was converted into apartments or condos there.
Yeah, right on North Main, right down the street from Corrado's.
Yep, that's right. Lou.
So, yes.
What do you want, Maki? No.
Oh man,
Randy!
That's hilarious.
He's always so loud.
Oh my gosh. It's so funny. And everybody expects you to have like a thick New England accent, but I just never acquired it. And neither did my wife. And thankfully, my 3 sons don't talk about parking the car. So,
And thankfully, none of us were afflicted with that.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. But no, we had some great times there in Natick. And, I mean, the industry has changed so much over the years. And I would imagine that from your perspective, you've seen a lot of change. And I know you were reflecting on that recently, just thinking about the design industry. But I'm curious to know just, what keeps you excited about it after all these years? Because you haven't hung up your cleats yet. And so you continue to show up. And so, I mean, what has inured you to this industry for this long a time?
Well, I think there's several things. First off, I always like to reflect on the people that are part of the industry. Or, they're smart and they're creative and they're talented and they're ethical and they're doing something good that the society actually needs. So that's a fine group of people to be friends with and work with. And I think as fine of a group as you'll find anywhere in any business. That's a big part of it for me is just the people. I mean, I still have some folks that I could say I worked with in 1980. I can still pick up the phone and call today. It's amazing, really. So the people is a big part of it. I think the other thing, though, is just the fact that, the industry, if we call it that, which I always did, but some people bristle at that, is finally been discovered as a business. And it's very exciting to me. I mean, there are some people who are doing unbelievably well in this business, a lot of people. And now that it's been discovered by private equity, the sense of possibilities and wealth creation and entrepreneurship, has only increased dramatically. So I think that's really exciting too. Because I mean, I like the design business. I like design, but it's not the only business I like. I like business. And I think now, certainly, if you look at the state of affairs 45 plus years ago, we were not as business oriented as we are. There was very little recognition that you could create value in one of these companies. It was basically strictly a professional service firm that was made up of professionals, and some of them got to be owners and join the income club, and everybody else just toiled away endlessly. And I think it's a totally different scenario now. It's much more positive. It's much more entrepreneurial than it was back then.
Yeah. I mean, gone are the days of the Dilbert comic, right? I mean, it has definitely evolved. And because I always tell people when I started in the industry and I got the opportunity which really came from you and your relationship, but got the opportunity to steward at the time was a huge contract with Carter and Burgess, which was a growing engineering company, but they were very buttoned down, and it was a different
Yeah.
it was a different age for design firms. And it has, when I walk into design firms today and I'm like, this isn't what I don't feel like I did when I walked into the Carter and Burgess headquarters in Fort Worth back in 97.
No
And I
kidding.
mean, I know it's a long time, but I mean, it's just things have just changed so much.
Yeah. Yeah, they have. And Carter and Burgess was in a way more entrepreneurial and business oriented than a lot of the other companies back then. Let's face it,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, it was, as you say, buttoned down. I mean, we didn't even take our coats off in the office. You wore a suit. You didn't wear a sport coat and pants back in those days. But I'll never forget the time when I met our buddy, our mutual friend, Po Sun Chen, coming from our San Francisco office. And I'm sure you must have heard this story, but
Oh yeah. Yeah.
we,
It's a good
we,
one though. You can repeat it.
we met at DFW airport. I was coming from Boston. He was coming from San Francisco. And I'm like, how are you going to change your clothes? Because we were going to go right over to Carter and Burgess. He goes, what do you mean? I go, you're not going to wear that, are you? You had like a golf shirt on and a pair of khakis or something. He goes, that's what I was going to do. I'm like, no, 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 no. We had to stop at Men's Warehouse and buy him a suit. Okay. It was really funny.
Yeah. I mean,
He was a young guy. He didn't know the culture that Carter and Burgess had back then.
yeah, and things have obviously changed, as we said, and you're right. I mean, at Carter and Burgess was actually ahead of the curve when it came to entrepreneurship in the space. But I think a lot of that emanated from Jerry Allen and the way that he operated things. I mean, he had a vision for what he wanted to do, and he saw a lot of that actually come to pass before he unfortunately passed away at such an early age. But
Yeah.
he had a tremendous impact. And, that's kind of the foundation of our conversation today, which is really looking at design firm leaders, right? And how do you lead in the good times and in the bad times?
Well, I mean, you're right. He did have a big impact on the firm, but most of the time, there is somebody out there, if you're talking about an entrepreneurial firm, who was the one who sort of set the fire in the first place. It starts with one person, you know, and we've known some other Jerry Ellen types. Obviously, you and I have over the years. But I think, what most important right now in this environment that we're in is optimism. And it's hard for people to maintain optimism. There's a lot of negative signals out there. If you really tune into the media, whatever social media, broadcast media, print media, negative, negative, negative. And yet, if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to accomplish anything and you're going to grow your business in spite of a lot of negative things happening, you've got to be positive. So it's absolutely essential that if you're not, you're going to get too fearful. You're going to pull in everything. You're going to retract. And of course, that's the beginning of death, you know? because you're either going up or you're going down. I mean, and in order to go up, you've got to be a leader who believes that it is possible to be successful in spite of all the obstacles that may exist currently or could exist in the future.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of what I hear you saying is, when you think about the whole concept of how leaders kind of balance realism with positivity, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like what's right in front of you, but you also know that you've got to put on a good face because people are always going to be looking at you at the end of the day and to
Yeah.
see how you react to things.
I mean, it's true. It's more than I mean, you do have to put that good face on, but you got to put that face on for yourself. Okay. Not just everybody else. You got to put it on for yourself. And so, I think to maintain an optimistic attitude, you do have to limit your intake of external news because it is generally negative. And that's a problem. I mean, to a certain extent, with anything I ever write or say, keep in mind, I'm also talking to myself. It's not like I'm immune to these things or I don't need to hear these things myself. I know from my own experience as somebody who probably does take in too much media that it's not healthy. Okay. And so when I don't, I can recognize the difference in my mental state. So that's one thing. I think there are other things too, though. I mean, you got to hang out with successful people who are still making it happen versus those who are defeated. And we all know the difference. I mean, there are people out there who are our friends who are negative.
Yeah.
They're retracting. They're not investing. They're pulling their money out of the stock market, or they're selling all their real estate, or they're getting out of their business, whatever. Okay. They're pulling in, they're contracting because they think things are bad. Or you can hang out with the other people that are like, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on out there, but there's still a million opportunities. All these other people who can't see it, who are pulling in, I'm going to go grab some of what they got right now. Okay. Now's my chance to
And
go
that's
after what they're letting go of.
Yeah. And I mean, there are, you talk about like seeing problems as opportunities, and
Yeah.
this is the perfect time for design
Mhm.
firm leaders to turn some of the challenges that their firm is facing into wins. Because, people always say if you can succeed in a down market or in just a down time, I'm using air quotes now, you can succeed anytime. And
Exactly.
yeah, and there are plenty of opportunities. I'm curious to know if you recollect a time that you've seen a firm that really kind of leaned into the challenges that they were facing and were able to kind of weather the storm and use those challenges as a platform to build on.
Yeah. I mean, you said Carter and Burgess right there as an example.
Yeah.
Buying the distressed companies, which was a big part of the strategy of Jerry Ellen, was a great example of there are other companies out there, they're not growing or they're declining or they've got financial problems or their lines of credit are being called or whatever. Their owners haven't trained any second tier. There's a chance to go buy those businesses and take them over and bring them under your umbrella and give them some new inspiration and give them some better leadership and better systems and better marketing and reinvigorate their people with a new sense of possibility. That's just a great example right there in itself.
Well, and I think I would add one ingredient that Jerry brought to the table that I think is certainly worth mentioning is the speed with which he responded to things. And you've always told famous stories about how you would get on the phone with Jerry and tell him about one of these quote unquote distressed or firms that had the potential or were ripe for the picking, if you will.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like Jerry to order like 10 reports and pull in a bunch of business folks to look at the data before he made a decision. He was on a plane that afternoon to go meet with the owners, and he would call you back the next day saying, well, we got a deal.
Yeah, I know. That's the truth. The guy was decisive and moved quickly. And of course, that takes confidence and faith in your own abilities to make things work. And, not everybody has it. I mean, again, it just goes back to this whole basic tenet of entrepreneurship. And you've got to be optimistic. If you're not, if you always see everything that can go wrong, you won't do anything. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just that simple. You will not do anything. You won't act because you'll be thinking of all the negative stuff that could happen. Okay.
You
So
know, I
it's
want,
a big part of it.
I wonder if maybe we have too much information at our disposal nowadays, right? Because I mean, Jerry didn't have access to Google and all this other stuff to parse this data and to think about things. I mean, it was more instinctual. It was more
Yes.
maybe a best practice as it was at that time. But it almost feels like, and I know I feel this way. I don't know how you feel, but sometimes you feel inundated by almost too much information
Oh, yeah.
before when you're faced with making a decision.
I think it's a real problem. And I think analytical people can feel like, well, they're somehow failing if they don't consider every source of information or seek out every source of possible information that's available. But it ignores the time factor. And opportunity is partly defined by how quickly you respond and timing. Timing is
Yeah.
a big part of any opportunity. And if you always need more information to make a decision, you can miss things. You can miss out. Okay. Somebody else is going to act faster than you.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like buying real estate. I mean, I think back on all the properties that we used to buy during the real estate recession. I mean, nobody wanted them. Okay. Why didn't they want them? Because they were scared.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
thought, gee, I may not be able to sell this. Or what if the economy gets even worse? Or what if this costs more to fix up than I thought it would? They'll think of all the reasons why they shouldn't do it. But if you're out there and you're decisive and you're optimistic and you have faith in your own abilities to overcome anything, then you act
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
create opportunities in the process. Everybody else is like, wow, look at that guy. He's so lucky. Can you believe it? How lucky he is?
Yeah. It's well, luck has really nothing to do with it. Sometimes we are just in the right place at the right time. And and I'm reminded, even as you use the illustration of real estate, and where we live in Northwest Arkansas is a very well, the market is kind of it's still strong. Houses are still relatively more expensive than they were just a few years ago. And I was actually just talking with a friend recently, and he said there's always somebody looking for a situation. And there's always a seller looking to sell outside of what we would consider the norm. And I think that's a good example for design firm leaders to recognize that sometimes in the way that you typically do business, some people may not necessarily be expecting you to do business that way, and that there will be opportunities for you to try different things and maybe even help clients out that didn't really know they needed help in the first place. And
Sure.
I'm speaking specifically of, like, for a real estate investor. Most real estate investors go out and they knock on doors or send mailers, or they get real low tech and just they keep reaching people. And my friend just
Yep.
told me the other day he had an owner just reach out to him, and when he asked the owner, "Why did you call me?" He said, "Well, you've been sending me these postcards for the last 6 months, so I figured you
Exactly.
were the person to talk to. Nobody else was." And they ended up doing a deal, and I think they flipped their property in 14 days. But in the same way, there's opportunities like that in the design industry space to work with clients that you never thought you could potentially work with.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think most things, it just comes down to doing the work. You described your friend and just how long and how he's been plugging away and all the methods that he uses to reach out to people and consistently just hammers, hammers, hammers. Well, eventually it bears fruit. It's the same thing out there in the design business if you want to work with a client. Again, I mean, it's just not that hard. I don't know what else to say. Do you have an email list? Do you use it? What do you send people? Do you try to sell them stuff all the time, or do you send them information that's useful?
Yeah.
Do you just try to go see them? Do you set up lunches and breakfasts and dinners when you're nearby or when you're going to be in that city or when you have the time? Do you hook up with them on LinkedIn and make sure they see all your stuff and Facebook? And do you call them up and once you have any kind of relationship at all, just to check on them as humans and not try to sell them anything? I mean, there's just like a million things that you can do that if you do all those activities consistently, then you're going to break through. It's just that simple. The odds are in your favor. A lot of business is really based on probabilities. And, you know, the law of big numbers bears out. It's so true. So yeah, there is an opportunity in the market to get to new clients. I mean, doing things that nobody else wants to do. I mean, it's always a great way to ingratiate yourself with a new client.
Yeah.
It's always been one of my favorite tactics.
Yeah. And speaking of which, I've been listening, how meta of me, but I've been listening to some other podcasts. And one podcast that I listen to quite a bit is one called Founders, where the guy goes and reads the biographies of great people. So think Andrew Carnegie, Sam Walton, Bill Gates, you name it, every major leader. And then he goes back, he's read biographies on the Rothschilds and JP Morgan, and the list goes on and on and on. The reason why I'm bringing it up is that one of the through lines that you see in all of these great leaders and great, titans of industry was the dogged determination to just do a couple of things really well and get out there and beat the bushes as often as possible. And so this guy's podcast encouraged me to read the biography, the early biography. There have been a few others, but one on Bill Gates called Hard Drive. And one of the things that it relayed was the fact that even as a young, dandruff-laden tech guy that Bill Gates was in the 70s, before, IT was cool and before computers really were a thing, he understood the principle of just getting out there and beating the bushes, trying to drum up support and create awareness for what they had to offer, which at the time would eventually become Microsoft Basic, which was the foundational software for the modern computer. And, he essentially almost willed this into existence. And But what he did wasn't rocket science. It's been an age-old, tried and true method of just getting out there and connecting with people. And we talk about it now like brute force. You just have to push yourself out there and make enough calls. And some people say, oh, you don't need to do that anymore. But those things work. Cold emails work. Like you laugh, but cold emails work. There are a number of things that design firms that are struggling for business right now, there are a number of practices that design firms could employ that would get more phone calls back into their office, would get more inquiries, more opportunities to answer an RFP just by virtue of you picking up the phone and reaching out to folks.
Yeah. I mean, there's a million things you can do. I mean, there's a guy named Rance Hayes. I don't know if you know him. He's a structural engineer in the Boston area.
Yes, I know Rance.
And I love his program where he'll take any set of structural plans done by anyone and see if he can find a way to save the owner money in the construction of it. And if he can find so much in savings, then he gets a percentage of it. It's brilliant. I mean, just think about all the different sets of plans he gets to see by everybody he competes with, and then has an opportunity to demonstrate how he can save the client money. Who do you think the client's going to go to the next time?
Him.
It doesn't even cost them anything.
Yeah.
But most engineers, they wouldn't do that. Yeah. There'd be a million reasons why they wouldn't do it. Well, I want to get crosswise with my brother over there I went to school with. We both graduated from Northeastern in 1978 with our BSCEs, and we're in the Alpha Kappa Psi fraternity together, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or, that wouldn't be professional to critique someone else's. That would be distasteful to do that. Or we don't want to do anything. We just want to get paid by the hour for everything we do. We're not greedy, but we must get paid. Yeah, I'm just saying there's all this other crap that gets in the way of doing something different that brings the clients to you.
Yeah. I mean, Renz is a great example of kind of how you can do something new. And I've always said that the design industry has been more old wineskin than new wineskin in terms of how they do things, but it's slowly coming around. And I was encouraged because recently I did a podcast interview with a couple of young up and coming engineers. They're all younger than us and, they're in their 20s. And I was really comforted to hear their focus and mindset of what they saw as leadership for the design industry and where they want to see the industry go in the future, because it's going to be incumbent upon them to take this industry to that next place that they take it to. And so there's a lot of opportunities for these young kids to mix the old with the new. Because I think there's some things that are just never going to go away in terms of marketing and in terms of getting the word out there about the services that you offer.
Yeah. I mean, the great thing is we're starting if you want to talk about this industry per se, which, I hate the term AEC when they lump contractors in with architects and engineers. I really do. And some people say, well, that stands for consultants. No, not really. If you go out there and look at what people are saying, they're saying architects, engineers, and contractors. Different business, totally different. But I think if you look at, the demand for AE services, you're starting from this position where there's just huge needs everywhere. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not like, people need to be talked into using the services of these companies. There's just the demand far exceeds the supply.
Yeah.
For as far out into the future as we can see. That's a great place to start from, rather than being in some kind of an industry where you've got to go out there and basically gin up demand for what it is you're selling because the marketplace doesn't even know they need it or want it.
Right.
I mean, think about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You start from this fundamental position of lots and lots of needs. Okay. If that doesn't encourage people and get people to be optimistic about the future of this business, hell, I don't know what will, Randy.
No, I agree. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I think, even in down markets, there are tremendous opportunities for design firms and design firm leaders to kind of lead the way and make things happen for their firm. I want to, because we talked about a couple of things, and I want to end on this topic. And because you've actually already alluded to it about breaking the rules and doing things a little differently. We just talked about marketing and client outreach. You mentioned utilizing an email list, utilizing your social media, staying top of mind and being relevant for people at all times. I would say this, and you tell me what you think about this, is I've always made it a point, even since leaving Zweig Group, that I stay in contact, and it's been almost 6 years now, but I stay in contact with most of the design firm leaders that I was working with when I was at Zweig Group. And so, of course, I know them. I know who their spouses are. I know what their kids are doing. I know a little bit about them.
And you're really good at that. Yeah, I know.
But I mean, and again, it's not so much. I mean, I know a lot of people that do that. And I basically use text messaging, and I try to reach out to 5 people a day just to stay in touch. And it's never transactional. It's always just checking in to see how you're doing. I mean, I reach out to you like that just to check in on you, make sure that
you're so good about
that you're up and about. But I think sometimes it's those little things that you do like that can make all the difference in the world. And when people are thinking about something, and or when you do actually make a call with an ask, that call is much easier received than it is if you just call out of the blue.
It's funny you say that, because I just wrote my next article that'll show up in the Zweig letter. You're going to think I wrote it because of this conversation, but I wrote it yesterday.
Oh, wow.
And it's out of my hands. Okay. But it's all on this bit about relationships and how critical it is to do that kind of maintenance. It's hard, though. In my case, I think about the priorities, and I doubt they're any different for you. But my first priority is my family. And then next, it's all the businesses that I deal with. Okay. And all the business people. And then next is students. That's is sort of I count the university as my business in a way. So that's my priority. Then there's a whole lot of other people that fall out there, right? If anything suffers, it's my friends and potential friends and acquaintances that I just don't have the time to do as good of a job as I would like maintaining relationships with them. And I think, you said it. I mean, the fact that you have this program where it's like 5 people a day I'm going to reach out to, I think that's great. I could say, well, I'm going to spend 20 minutes every day doing that, making calls or emails or texts to people. It's just 20 minutes a day. It's going to be at the same time. It's going to be scheduled. I'm just going to always do it.
Yeah, it's on my calendar. It's on my Google Calendar at 9 a.m. And I typically send out those text messages, and it takes me all of 5 minutes. Because again, it's just, hey, just checking in. Hope you're doing well. Boom. And that's that. And of course, if conversations continue beyond just the normal pleasantries and just the check-in to make sure everybody's okay, then you can have that. But sometimes it's just, you just want to maintain connection with other
Yeah.
people, so
Yeah.
I think that's important. There are a couple of other things I do want to mention that you've talked about quite a bit in terms of like when it comes to like breaking the rules and doing things differently. Again, marketing and client outreach. You also talk about firm ownership, underscoring the issue of how you deal with traditional ownership models that don't quite work anymore.
Yeah. Well, the old models were that there's going to be so many employees for every partner, or, we're going to maintain a real small group of owners and we're going to bonus out the money so the next group can buy in. There's these certain things that we tended to do over time for many, many years in this business.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's not that hard to do something like, let's open up the stock to anybody who wants it, or a much, much wider group of people than is traditional. And one of the barriers to that, again, goes back to the culture, which says, oh, you're an owner. Now you've got to be a manager. Now you've got to be a member of the board of directors. No, no, no. Nobody said that. But there's nothing wrong with being an owner and having a chance to build up a little net worth, build something other than value in your house. Maybe you can't even afford a house today.
Yeah.
You got some other way to do it, and doing it in the place that you work certainly seems to make sense to me. And then it also helps the company maintain those people, keep them there, because they are allowing them to become owners in this organization in an industry where the culture doesn't let everybody become owners. What a great opportunity to get good people,
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's one of the reasons why a lot of design firms or not a lot, but I would say there's some design firms that are inching towards an ESOP model where everybody gets a little bit of ownership. And there are obviously a lot of different ways. I just know that I've dealt with several firms where they're an ESOP and everybody's walking around with their head held high, peacocking because they have a piece of the pie.
Yeah, I'm not as big of a fan, honestly, of ESOPs as a lot of people.
Really?
No, because you own shares in a trust. The trust actually owns the company. So it's not quite the same. And then, the other thing is that it becomes so fragmented that no one wants to sacrifice. I was on the board of one company that was 100% ESOP, and we bought some of the stock back and distributed it to the CEO and CFO and COO. So they had enough ownership stake to make it worth their while.
Yeah.
Sacrifice to grow the company. Otherwise, it just can degenerate into, I just want to get as much money out of it as I can right now because my ownership is never really going to be worth anything.
Yeah.
It's such a fragmental, a small fragment.
Well,
but there are ESOP, there are ESOP zealots out there that think it's like a religion to them. And there is some evidence that financially, from a profitability standpoint, ESOP firms do perform slightly better than non-ESOP firms.
Interesting.
So there are benefits to it. But to me, it's not the same as selling stock and holding that piece of paper in your hand. That's your stock certificate. And you are now a quote, real owner in the business. And the other thing, I mean, you've seen this too, where like companies like, yeah, we're going to sell stock to those associates out there or whatever, but they're not going to have voting rights. Like, why? So let's continue to make them second-class citizens. What is that about?
Here's some B shares of stock.
Yeah. Let's make them second-class citizens because we're afraid that this 5 or 8 or 10% of the company is going to like overthrow the other 95 or 90% of the company. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But, they're fearful and, any kind of change is risky.
Yeah. Well, and the other one along those same lines is just the whole open book management, right? When you think about financial transparency, I remember you were at the forefront of this charge because that was new to me because I had worked at another company before I worked at Zweig, but that company didn't share any numbers. I didn't know anything that was going on, but I became acutely aware of where we stood on a daily basis at Zweig, so much so that it actually was motivation for me to be like, oh, well, hey, we're we're having some challenges here. Let's work through this. And there was never a time when I was mystified about where the company was and what we were trying to accomplish.
That's the goal, and to educate everybody in the business and build trust too, because you know that it's all right there. There's nothing that's being hidden. And I think open book is such a great tool. It amazes me how many firms won't do it still. I mean, they got every reason in the world. The employees won't understand it. You know, they're going to be afraid. They're all going to see how much money I make, and they're all going to expect me to make more. Or they'll say, you know, as soon as they find out what other people make, no, we never said we're going to share all the salaries, dude. Okay. But, you know, there's just all these things out there that keep people from doing it. But it's a great tool, and it's the way you school the next generation, and it makes people think, you know, about how they're spending their money and their time. And especially if you tie that in with some kind of structured bonus program where you pay money out to everybody based on the company's performance that's measured in that open book report. I mean, that to me is really, that's when it really gets interesting, and people can see a direct response to, you know, what they've done and the numbers and how they benefit from it. That's the ideal world.
Yeah. And that's when people really start figuring things out, and their actions are mimic what their desired outcomes, what they want them to be.
Exactly.
So last thing that I certainly want to mention, and this is an area where you really cut your teeth in this industry more than anything else, which is recruiting aggressively. And I know you have very, very strong emotions around the whole concept of recruiting. And you and I both see a lot of the same mistakes still being made in 2025 that were made in the 90s. But why hiring should be proactive and not reactive, right? Why should it be a thing that we should be looking for opportunistic candidates, people that, you know, aren't necessarily looking and are where they are happy where they are? Why should we really be focusing more on that?
Or we aren't necessarily looking to replace a vacancy that currently exists because somebody left. You know, I think that's also part of it. But I mean, why? Because you're running a team, for God's sakes. You're a coach of a team. If you're, you know, the Arkansas Razorbacks, what are you going to say? I'm not recruiting right now because I've got everybody in every position. Right. No, you're constantly recruiting. You don't know what's going to happen. A, you might find somebody better. B, somebody else may leave, in which case you've got a hole there. It's the way you upgrade. It's the way you've got to constantly upgrade your team. So, yeah, I'm going to be constantly recruiting, and there's never a time when I would say, no, I'm not interested in anybody. We'll never consider talking. That's ludicrous. And obviously the best people are the ones that are still employed or not looking. And if I'm going to get them interested, I've really got to do a sales job on them. I mean, what else can you say? I got to sell them. That's okay. I'm going to figure out what their wants and needs are and how we can address those better than where they are at present.
In your estimation, you believe that most firms, not all, but most firms have space in their budget to take on an opportunistic candidate that could eventually make a difference for their bottom line down the road, right?
Oh, God, yes. I mean, whether they have it as an add-on or they have an opportunity to upgrade and move somebody else out, I do think that's the reality of the situation. Sure, anybody can do that. It's a matter of, are we using our resources the best way? I'll just go back to the sports team analogy.
Yeah.
You know, I've got to constantly be trying to build my team and have a better team. And people get tired. People get sick. People think that the grass is greener somewhere else. People get a bad attitude. People have personal problems that get in the way.
Yeah.
People have physical problems that make them not perform as well. All that's just the reality of life. But we've got to constantly be building and improving and finding people who work well together and are good performers in and of themselves. You know?
In sports, every great general manager is always looking for the next great free agent to bring on board. So
exactly.
Yeah.
They're not sitting around thinking about whether they have a need or not right now.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And they'll make room for greatness. Mark, I want to ask you this one last closing question. If a firm owner listening to this episode wants to make one radical change this year, 2025, we're still early in the year. The first quarter isn't even over at the time of recording this. What should it be?
Wow, that's a toughie. I think if nothing else, they should implement open book management, and it's got all the relevant data, and they send out their monthly report along with an explanation, a narrative. And I think the other thing they need to do, I'm going to say 3 more things, but they're all tied in with this. Continuous cash flow monitoring. So they're constantly doing the forecasting and where they're going to be cash wise, looking out into the future. Daily cash reporting to everybody and daily sales reporting to everybody. Those are the things that I would be focusing on. So we get really tuned in to exactly what's happening in the business on a continuous basis. And no time goes by where people are surprised.
All right. So open book management, continuous cash flow monitoring, and daily cash flow monitoring is the name of
cash
the
flow
game.
forecast.
Okay.
I said monitoring, but really it's forecasting.
Forecasting. Okay. I got you.
Yeah. And daily cash reporting and daily sales reporting.
And daily sales. Yeah. It all helps.
That's what I do. Okay. I'd get the gauges on the machine so we know what the heck's really going on.
And it's really not that hard to monitor. Once you set it up, and I know it's just, a lot of times it's just plugging the numbers, but there's nowhere to hide if you do that. I think everything is out in the open. And at that point, you start to see where your warts are if you have any.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you really get tuned into the situation. I say this, I was surprised. I work with a company and they've got some financial issues where their bank is telling them to go find a new bank. Okay. And in order to find that new bank, the first step is they've got to reduce their current line of credit by $1 million by a certain date and time. And it was interesting to me that in spite of that, the management of the firm gets no daily cash reporting whatsoever. Nothing. Okay. Blew me away. I'm like, you're under the gun like this. You got to reduce your line of credit by $1 million. And your managers don't see every day how much cash has gone in, how much cash has gone out, and what that line of credit balance is.
That's like the definition of flying blind.
Yeah, exactly. It just freaking blew me away. Okay.
Oh man.
It just absolutely blew me away.
Well, that's what that's called. That's called business security for firms like Zweig Group and others that consult these firms, because hopefully at some point in time, somebody in control has here's a voice of reason that helps them to right the wrongs that they have implemented. So,
Yeah, that's not, as we've said many times, probably on this podcast before, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, finding improvements.
It is indeed. Yeah.
In this business and in these firms. So,
man, that's great. Well, listen, Mark, thank you so much for joining us as always. Your insights are extremely valuable. We really appreciate you. And I want to remind our listeners that they can always catch your articles every Monday in the Zweig Letter newsletter, which is one of the longest running newsletters in the design industry. And I always say that even if it isn't, because it seems like it is. So I might as well say that 1992 to today. So it's been running for a long time. So thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate you, man.
Thanks, Randy. It's always good to hang out with you. I appreciate you, my friend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, that's another episode of the Zweig Letter Podcast. To learn more about one of the oldest newsletters in the design industry, visit zweiggroup.com. You can read articles online, listen to this podcast, and sign up for a free subscription to the newsletter and have it delivered right into your email inbox every Monday morning. Sign up today. For more information about Zweig Group's advisory services or any Zweig Group publications, visit zweiggroup.com. You can subscribe to the Zweig Letter Podcast wherever you listen to it, and please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we'll see you back here soon. Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zweig Letter Podcast. We hope that you can be part of elevating the industry and that you can apply our advice and information to your daily professional life. For a free digital subscription to the Zweig Letter, please visit thezweigletter.com/subscribe to gain more wisdom and inspiration, in addition to information about leadership, finance, HR, and marketing your firm. Subscribe today.